Hey, welcome to the future of role-playing. Here's our latest update on Archmage Rises with Thomas and Nick. That's right. Yeah, you're Nick. Two guys who are foolish enough to try and smart enough to pull it off. That's what Archmage Rises is. So we have an exciting update this week, don't we, Nick?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, that was quite the leading question. I could never be a lawyer. Objection! Leading. So I was traveling last week and like a fool forgot my laptop charger because I was using it for another laptop and totally forgot to put it back in the bag. And then I got down to Toronto, which is 8 hours away, and I was like, oh no! So I went and I bought one, and the one I bought it at Best Buy, and the one that you buy at Best Buy doesn't even charge. It doesn't even have enough power to run my CPU. Never mind charge the battery. So all I could do was email, Netflix, and maybe Facebook, and that was as far as my computer could go. So, anyways, this update, if you're watching this kind of live, then this update is a day late, and if you're watching it through the archive, then you don't care. But that's what happened. So we got 5 things to share. This is going to be pretty dense, and I'm trying to go quickly. Let's keep this about 10 minutes. How's that sound, Nick?
That sounds great. Let's do it.
Yeah, we'll never do it, but we'll try. So first thing is, I was down in Toronto area checking in on my software company. It's year end, and the good news is that we didn't lose as much money this year as I feared that we would lose, and so that was really good news. So we lost a big pile of money, but we didn't lose as much as we could have, and so things are good. So for those who remember our update in kind of early May, where I was talking about the software company, that's kind of the status there. Now, why is that important? The reason is that the software company pays me a wage, which I turn around and then pay everybody else with. So that's how I'm financing the game. And so some people were reacting negatively to me sharing kind of the news in April, May. They were like, oh, that's it, Archmage is dead and stuff. Well, the good news is that software company has bounced back and picked up some new clients and picked up some big projects from existing clients. And so based on my meetings that I had, everything's looking good for the software company for basically the next year. So that means that we have a nice long roadway in order to keep building the game. So there you go, Nick. We don't have to release for another year because I got the financing lined up.
No!
That's not what it means, but it means that everybody involved can be paid. Theoretically, nobody knows the future for sure, but the way things look now, we can afford to keep working on this diligently for the next year, and we'll be okay.
Yeah, that's good news indeed.
It is good news. Were you worried?
No. Thomas, you always find a way. I'm not worried.
Well, I was worried. I was worried for you. And if Roger's watching this, he should have been worried, but probably wasn't. Yeah, so we found a way. So with that aside, now we can go and talk about the game. So we're going to show a little bit of the game at the end of this video, but really it's going to be more of a talky video. And that's because we have made a ton of changes to this game as we've been working through the history generation and getting it all working. So in terms of schedule update, like when is Build 11 going to be done? We are now 4 things down out of the 6 that we needed to get done in terms of feature completeness. So that makes us 66.67% complete. Ooh. So that's good news, and it's running pretty well. We still have, for 2 of these features that are done, we still have a little bit of work on them. But anyway, 4 to 6. So we're getting real close on Build 11, and that is, of course, mayors of the towns in order to send out settlers and start new towns. That needs to happen for the filling of the earth as we blast through time. That actually shouldn't be too hard. I've already done it in the history generator, and we just need to plug that in. And then the final one is getting the monsters working and having them spread their layers around the world. And since we use pretty much the same code between the human settlements and the monster layers, that's why we have to do it in that order. So already basically got that code working in the history generator prototype, and now we just have to put it in the full game. So Don't know exactly when those will be done, but we will give you another update next week. Okay, so the next thing. So we have been retooling this thing like crazy and making it way more in depth than really I ever wanted to. But why do we do that?
Because it's a sandbox game, and it requires it.
Yeah. So we were trying to streamline things and fake some things, and at the end of the day, it just wasn't working, and that's why we're like, crap, we're going to have to go in and make this real. And so we are simulating things down to a level that we didn't expect before, but creates some pretty cool features. So one of the things we have is a hierarchy of needs for every single citizen in the world. And so they go through their hierarchy of needs, like I need shelter, I need food, I need loving, I need a weapon, I need all these various things. And so when events occur to them where they like lose safety or they lose shelter or they haven't eaten, then that causes different behaviors for them. Was there anything more to say about the hierarchy of needs?
I mean, I think technically how it works is interesting. I don't know. We don't have to get into that, I guess, but it seems to work really well. I can say that.
Yeah. Yeah, it does work well. It's, if anybody's played the game Tropico, it kind of works like that. And you have the person, they have the various needs, they try to fulfill their needs. If they can't fulfill the needs, then we have a demand system that tracks the demand. So for instance, somebody's like, hey, I want to buy a meal, and he has enough money in order to buy a meal. Okay, so he goes to buy the meal, and there's no meal. That demand that is unmet is tracked internally. And then that allows traders and the mayor to make strategic choices about like, hey, this many people are not eating, so that really bumps it up kind of the queue in terms of actions that people take. So it's really cool to see the AI be so data driven. Also, when there are problems, the whole thing becomes a giant nightmare. Like we had a situation where the butcher died and his job never got filled, and so since he wasn't able to turn livestock into food, everybody in the town died. So
yeah. Because the trader wasn't able to keep up with the demand, right? He's able to go to other towns and buy things they need and come back, but it wasn't enough to feed the people, so they just died off.
So one of the major changes we made, like core inside, was giving everybody an inventory. And after we gave everybody an inventory, we gave them the ability to get jobs. And so now when there's a building built, like for instance, the inn, that creates an innkeeper job and a wait staff job. And then those jobs are filled by the people living in that particular town. So if there's not enough people in the town, then the jobs go unfilled. And if there are, then they continue to work it. And so when it's the person's turn, they go about doing their business, whatever that is, generating food or serving people or whatever. And then that creates opportunities for interactions. Now, by everybody having their own inventory and having their own job, then they have their own pay. So people earn money based on the jobs that they have, and then they use that money in order to meet their demands, such as buying food and building a house. So whether they buy fancy food or not, if they go to buy a weapon, do they get a good weapon or a cheap weapon, all those things. So we've been working hard on just making basically NPCs as close to player characters as possible. Not entirely intentional, but it certainly solved a lot of problems for us.
Yeah, and I think people were making turns like every month or something. Now it's every day. So we've really cranked up the resolution of activity.
And we're going to be moving that to every hour.
Yeah, if we can get the tech running fast enough, we'd love to have that thing go in real time. But we'll see. We'll see how efficient we can get this thing to run. Right, because a lot of data. Well, so that's what we're working on.
We talked about ways that we could kind of streamline that, and one is to give, if you're in a particular town, then the people in the town get a turn every hour, whereas the people that are far away, we can simulate jumps of time, which is something that was important for the history generator. So if we want to pass a week, the person will go through all the proper motions for a week, and if we just pass an hour, they go through the proper motions for 1 hour. So the ability to scale that allows us a lot of flexibility in how we implement the tech. So that so moving to turns per hour really will show how alive the world is. We had kind of a big discussion meeting about that, about like, this is really going to tax our technical capabilities. But what are the payoffs? The payoffs are that you can sit in the inn and see people coming in and out, just like an MMO. Like you see people coming in and out all the time. They can walk up and approach you, for instance, right? And so we think that is really going to sell the experience of being in a living world. And so it's worth figuring out the tech to do that. And if we can't, then we'll be hiring in order to figure that out. So yeah, that's been exciting. Now the next big change that we made is we have eliminated all the resources, or most of the resources that you saw in build 10. So for instance, you would go to the merchant and you would buy this thing, like a group of things called weapons, or a group of things called potions and such. And once you bought that, then you would go and trade that. Now the difficulty with it was that like kind of like pile of weapons wasn't actually usable by the player. And this is where that really caused some questions for us. And like, it's kind of weird that you got these weapons that you can't, I don't know, take one out and equip. It's like, oh, I have no weapon, even though I got a stash of weapons in my cart. And so that led to a lot of discussion and reflection. And we decided, okay, we're going to make everything in the world exist for real. So what that means is there isn't this generic stack of weapons. If there's a sword, there's a sword. And if there's 20 daggers, there's 20 daggers. So we then created what we call categories of items. And so if a town is under attack by goblins, then the price of weapons will go up. That price of weapons used to just be the single resource weapons, but now it's the category of items, which is weapons. So if you show up with a long sword worth 100 gold, you might see a 30% price spike on that. If you show up with an enchanted weapon worth 1,000 gold, you'll see a 30% price hike on that. So it allows you to deal in fancy weapons or Lola or just very common weapons, depending on where you are, at what stage you're at in the game.
Yeah, and the important thing about really, sort of these changes that we've made is we want people to play the game in ways that we haven't thought of ourselves, right? And so if it's simulated, like if everything's done in a way that makes sense, the economy's running, each item makes a difference, then you could do crazy stuff. Like if there's some way you could, help the bad guys, then it's going to hurt hurt the town. Like who knows what people could dream up, but it really just increases the ways that you can interact with the simulation, with the game.
And by making all these separate inventories, so there's inventories in buildings. So for instance, you go to a blacksmith, he has an inventory of metal that he has bought, and then he has his output of tools, which he's created and is going to sell them. So if you burn down the blacksmith shop for some reason, then whatever metal he has is gone. It's so the town itself loses it. So that becomes important when it comes to if you burn down a barn or something like that, like a granary or something, then all the food goes away. So making the game more detailed like that opened up a lot more possibilities for the player and NPCs and town.
Yeah, if you're stockpiling like metal, right, and then some town burns down that's just full of blacksmiths, they're around these hills and they're just full of metal. They're supplying the whole world, and they don't need to build metal because these guys, are rock stars and they're doing it cheaper than anybody else can. Now you have all this metal, and now the price goes up, and now you can just be rich, right? So just being able to read what's happening in the world and take advantage of that, we find really interesting.
And the last thing we've done is we've created this new resource called Food Stuff. And it's kind of it is a real word, food stuff, but it sounds kind of weird. I don't know if any game has ever used it. But
I've never used it.
The idea of Food Stuff is it's all the generic things that go into making food, right? So you have like flour and sugar and I don't know, potatoes and carrots and just like whatever. It's just like all the stuff that you use in order to make food, right? So you go to make like a stir fry. It's not just the meat. There's like other things in there. And so rather than having every possible vegetable in there, oh, here's an onion, here's a pepper, here's whatever, we just created this generic thing called food stuff. And so food stuff is the thing that allows you to make food and consume food. And so all the people in the world eat food stuff. And so if they were to get, say, a pig, then the pig is converted down into food stuff and may or may not release some raw bacon and some pork meat. And so, yeah, that's what we created. So food stuff is now this really important resource that you can trade around in the world because it's what everybody is eating. So if you poison the food stuff in a town, then that really affects everybody's ability to live.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of the base level, like it's like the gruel of the world.
That's right. It's any and every ingredient. Okay, so that kind of covers off all the changes that we've made deep within the simulation system. And now we can switch off and actually show you some of the game, and we can show you how the traders are actually moving around in the world and doing stuff. So let's show that. Okay, so here we are in the game, and wow, this town is really sparse. But if we pass some time, hey, somebody got a job, made enough money, and built himself a house. That's kind of cool. Let's go see who that is. Herbert. Let's see what his job is. Knock on the door. Talk to him. He's living there by himself. What do you do? Oh yeah, we're gonna add skills to everybody, so every NPC can have skills. And so when we go to recruit people for the jobs that I had mentioned earlier, we actually look to see like who's the most skilled in the town, and then give them the job. Oh yeah, what is your job? Oh, he's a trader. Okay, so why don't you explain what the traders are, Nick?
Traders go from they basically travel the roads looking for a town that's close to them, and then they look at the needs of that town based on what people have requested and haven't been able to get, and then they go there and they try to buy it if they're selling it. So they're there to basically keep the town running. If they're, maybe they're out in the desert and they're creating some valuable resources that they can't make food or not sustainably, that allows them to sort of keep the town running. And they make a little money off the top.
Yeah, so they can trade gems for food or something like that, rather than the place just dying.
Right.
So you've been working on this last week while I was traveling, and you added in a new little feature. What are these little tiny peoples that I see on the screen?
So we added the ability to be able to track any character. We don't know what we're going to let the player see or not, or how the player can get access to that, but it really helped with testing to allow you to see the person's position. So in this case, we're using the lightweight calls to basically travel and lerp the position of the traders. So each of those little people are a trader.
Yeah, and we can see them travel around, right? So this guy left this town, and this guy left this town, and so we can see where they're going.
And if they stop moving, they ran into some trouble. They starved to death or something.
Yeah, so this guy made it here from here. And all these traders are going down to this town. So there's a lot of cool ideas that come out of this, that we could use spells in order to track people, or have a spell in order to see what are all the people around me. We're not sure yet all that we can do with it, but I think it's pretty cool to be able to see the NPCs moving around in the world.
Yeah, and let us know if you have some ideas, because it's not really realistic to see everybody moving around, but we like the idea of being able to set up an ambush or something, or track somebody who's doing something nefarious. So let us know what you think is a good idea.
Or you can see one of your loved ones, like your wife or something, as she travels down the road and goes shopping in another town. Or
exactly.
Like yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. You put a tracking spell on somebody, or it's based on your relationship with them. If you have a high relationship, then you can track them. I don't know.
Cool. Okay, well, that's all we have for this week. We are still grinding away on the internals of this thing, but we are getting close.
Indeed. We're working on, I think, what's next on the list? Basically, make sure the monsters are working with everything. We have that code and stuff in from. Yeah, and then settlements. Yeah, so those are the two things we're working on this week.
Yep. Okay, that's it for this week, and thanks everybody for your interest, and we're going to deliver you something great with all this cool tech.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye.